Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra,
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people.
associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked.
and sometimes what didn't,
You will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts.
And inspire you to do even greater things.
In this episode, I continue my conversation with Yev Khessin. In part one, Yev talked about his early career and how the idea of connecting objects in motion came up. In part two of my conversation with Yev Khessin, the CTO and founder of DIMO, Digital Infrastructure for Moving Objects, with a goal to build something disruptive, continues to share his story and shares his thoughts and experiences related to how he decided to start up DIMO, finding a partner and picking a few use cases in the automotive space that need to be addressed, the experience of launching a company as a team of 4 founders, and why that was needed to address the large problem space that they are addressing. Getting together during COVID, taking up a couple of consulting assignments to validate their assumptions and increasing the confidence of the need and what DIMO could do. He then talks about the role of a chief architect, particularly in a close team of founders when different founders had their individual roles defined to ensure that there is little overlap, but together they address various parts of the roadmap. He also shares his personal style of being a servant leader and the need for various teams to come together, and how he keeps track of evolving technologies and identifying the right ones for DIMO. He also shares the tech stack that they're using and how leaving things with the persons closest to the code or the customers empowers individuals to bring out the best. Even with multiple teams, how consistency of user experience is ensured, and leveraging the large community with testing, validation, etc., to help rapid iteration has been helping DIMO. The implication of personal and shared data preferences in making a connected system effective is something that he touches upon, and how DIMO addresses that through fine-grained options to the users to let them be in charge of their data. The role of smart contracts in the DIMO ecosystem and how that lets other players also come in as contributors. He shares his views on electric vehicles and alternative fuel vehicles and the implication of complex software that may be energy guzzling, and the implication of recycling for battery-powered vehicles. Finally, he shares his career tips related to entering the automotive solution space. A wonderful conversation. We had to cut it short because of the time constraints. Hope to get Yev back again sometime soon. Listen on.
You've been mentioning a lot of things that are being conceived, that have been created by DIMO. Let's talk a little bit about the DIMO origin story. What was it that brought you to DIMO? How did you said you were also a consultant. From there, how did the startup bug bite you? And how did this founding team come together? Because I have a couple of questions related to that.
Yeah, of course. So, DIMO, really is like I said, the summary of my, 10 years in the automotive space. And I would like to say I've seen quite a bit of different problems and different solutions in that time. So I think the point where DIMO really came together was actually when I met my co-founder, Andy, and he was working at Waymo at the time. And Andy's background, it was in transportation, and mine was in connected vehicle. And we realized that we were talking about the same kind of problems, which is a lot of the things we've been talking about on this call here. And we thought, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we tried to actually solve this problem? And at the same time was when, we saw the rise of blockchain in the last few years, and we are leveraging blockchain technology, but we're using it in a slightly different way than a lot of other companies are. We really look at it as a global database for transportation and publicly available DMV data. So, which I know there's a lot in there to unpack, but there are certain use cases that blockchains are good for, and publicly readable information is one of them. So putting together our separate but also very similar experiences, the rise of recent technologies, we saw kind of, I guess, where it's all going, and also how we could leverage what's happening today to help solve this problem of a more connected, smarter world with smarter cars, smarter transportation, and better alignment between developers, ecosystems, cities, riders, passengers, and how to build that in a much more open and aligned way.
How did this team come together? Because one thing that I was curious about was usually you find that there is one founder, sometimes probably founder and a co-founder.
Mm-hmm.
And here I see a team that's all
Yes.
co-founders. So, yeah.
Yes. So that is we do have 4 founders on the team, which is probably our biggest asset. A lot of people are like, you have a lot of founders. Like, yeah. Well, we're building something very big, right? And when you're building something really big, it takes an army. So the team started originally with me and Andy, and then Alex and Rob came on board. And generally speaking, we all bring different perspectives. So some of us bring more of the automotive or the transportation angle, or the blockchain angle, or let's say the marketing sales angle. So we have put all these things together into creating DIMO. And I guess I hope I'm answering your question, but we met during COVID, actually through a mutual friend, and we originally started with a bit of a consulting shop, trying to figure out what exactly we wanted to build, and eventually settled on this idea after getting some good market feedback about people really do want to own their data, and people do want a more open ecosystem.
So I fully get that the task ahead is pretty big and you need all that. But when different people bring in different perspectives, even in software development, we have these 2 models of having completely autonomous teams, but still you need a chief architect.
Yes.
Someone who probably kind of orchestrates everything together or has the bigger picture. So in a close team of multiple founders, how do you get to a consensus on alignment so that you can prioritize what you want to do?
That makes sense. Yes. So we all let's say run different parts of the roadmap, because there is so much to what we're building. It actually allows us to have, to some extent, very little overlap in terms of let's say epics that I'm responsible for versus other co-founders are responsible for. So while I do take on the role of chief architect, CTO, I'm generally I like to say a servant leader on a day-to-day basis, and I do take a lot of input from my team on how we should build things. And with a lot of the software that we're building kind of being very new and early, it does require a whole team to come together in order to figure out how to integrate all of these technologies together. DIMO has a large mix of, we have embedded we have embedded code, we have your standard Web 2 infrastructure running on a cloud server, we have smart contracts, we have a mobile app, we have a web app, right? So it takes a whole team to really integrate all of these things together. We work very closely with one another to make sure that it all works together and we can solve this complexity in a very nice way and better than it's been done before. So I do try to leverage my 10 years of seeing 4 to 5 different connected vehicle products come together and seeing their benefits, their downsides, what worked, what didn't, in terms of into this product here. Blockchain is hard. Connecting 10 million vehicles to the internet is hard. It's even harder to do them all at once.
You kind of partially answered my next question. That is, as a CTO, how do you keep track of all these technologies and choose the appropriate ones? Or in your case, I'm assuming that you'll also be inventing something new to fill the white spaces.
Yes, yes. So
What's your secret sauce?
Our secret sauce, to be honest, is our great team and hard work. I'm not big about talking about tools, but in terms of our tech stack, we use a lot of Go, because I've, coming from a long time of Java, I found that it saves quite a bit on resources and allows us to write quite robust software. We write React. We use React on our front end and our mobile applications. I'm a big Kubernetes fan myself, so any layer 2 web 2 services that we're running are running on that. And in terms of project management of all these things, we really try to have our engineers be the engineering leaders on the team. So we've actually just been operating without a PM and letting the engineers manage their own backlog any way they like. So today we use Trello, we used to use Jira. Generally speaking, I think the right approach is to leave as much as possible to the person who's closest to the code, and to put them as close as possible to the customer. Obviously from the leadership team level, we've built a roadmap, and things come from there. But historically, I've used, I think, almost every type of project management and alignment software in the world. And at the end of the day, it really does come down to people in the team to leverage those tools, because those tools will not deliver value for you. It's the people that are using them that will.
With the autonomy of teams, what do you do to ensure a consistent user experience, which has to be consistent over time as well?
Yeah. So ensuring consistency is something that we actually spend a lot of time on. One interesting thing I think that we're doing, because I think consistency is kind of getting into testing and QA as well. We actually don't have a QA team, but what we do have is a very large community in our chat. So I'll have almost 7,000 members in there. We have some people in the community that are very, very close to the project. Let's say, and to some extent, help us with the consistency side of this. They are not on our team, but they help us test the code. They help us validate the code. They give us very frequent feedback on what's working, what doesn't. And through that rapid iteration with people that have joined the project from the community side is how I really think we deliver that consistency and experience and quality, by making sure that they love it first and foremost before we even release it to the rest of the DIMO community.
Probably slightly different question now in terms of data, since you talk about the data and privacy and everybody owning their data. For the space that you're talking about in terms of mobility, it has to have some basis for which different, say, people or the personal data has to work together. And when people selectively share more or less, do you think that's going to degrade the overall experience of having a connected ecosystem?
That's interesting. So I think it's more of a human question than anything else. But what I would say is, no, I think it will actually enable more trust in the product itself. Having spent time at OnStar and Eris and Volkswagen and Ford, what we found is if you give somebody an option and a better option, in terms of connectivity, and you make it clear what they're getting, they will not essentially shut off their connected vehicle subscription, right? I don't think that allowing somebody to choose their privacy level will degrade the experience. I think it will actually improve it, because a lot of people today and younger generations have hesitancy around sharing their data. And a lot of it goes into who am I sharing it with and what is it for? So giving a user a precise set of toggles that says, here is who can use my data and who cannot, will make it likely easier and a better experience for everybody. And I'll give you one example of this. So as part of joining DIMO Network, you essentially opt into some very high level aggregated data that is not your location or your let's say PII, right? And I think splitting apart the data monetization away from what makes the world better for everybody is an important aspect. And let me be more specific with that. Sharing, for example, the weather from your vehicle is something that would improve, essentially create a new way for people to gather that. Road quality is something that is not PII information, right? And all of these things are something that affects everybody, but is currently not collected by any other connected vehicle programs, and cities actually pay to someone else to collect it. So creating a way for someone to connect their vehicle and be, kind of as part of opting in, you're okay with the public utility side of it, and separating it away from whether you want to sell this data to a hedge fund, I think is those two toggles, and creating those separately is what's going to create that trust initially, but also allow people to opt into applications or revenue that they want to get on top of the basic connectivity, essentially, that can benefit everybody. And whether that's traffic, whether that's weather, whether that's road quality, or vehicle performance even.
You touched upon the regulations that vary internationally, or probably even state to state or city to city.
Yeah.
So how do you build that in?
Yeah. So this is the part where actually I know the blockchain space has been getting a lot of bad, let's say, bad press recently, but at the same time, this is where the smart contracts actually become very useful, right? So if you remove the, selling images or online, or, trading money for other money out of it, smart contracts core use case is actually what you just described, which is I want to create a set of rules that can be different by region, that anybody can access globally and anybody can add, right? Which creates a nice open plane for for device manufacturers, such as car OEMs, to integrate with somebody like a city who could be anywhere in the world, right? And today, this is very much handled through this integration sort of handled through consulting companies, or very closed source software that's contracted out to one company to build on a per city basis. So coming to a standard that we can all get around would make this integration between city and device manufacturer much easier, because you can set these rules dynamically when somebody is essentially registering their vehicle, as opposed to, well, to be fair, this world is very non-digital today. So
Yeah.
As a car OEM, what you have to do is take a union of all of the regulations worldwide and take the hardest one and design around that. So it would be a much better world if, when the car came off the ship, it had an API that it could call and say, what are the regulations here, and let me apply those.
I'm probably making a very simplistic assumption here, that when you talk about all these autonomous vehicles and all that they are likely to be electric vehicles.
By the time electric vehicles are, let's say, mass deployed, I strongly believe they will be almost exclusively electric.
Because the follow-on question is related to that. We talk about using electric vehicles or alternative fuel vehicles to reduce the overall, the carbon footprint.
Right.
But would the compute requirements for all the things that you've been talking about kind of offset that at least a little bit? Because you will talk about blockchain and others being very, very energy intensive.
So I think that's a good question, and helps me. Gives me a chance to clarify something as well. So the vehicle itself does not run a blockchain node, right? But just speaking more generally about the space, I think what we're seeing now is a large move from proof of work to proof of stake, which will address a lot of the, let's say, power consumption issues. So, I guess to answer your question, there will not. I don't foresee. I foresee the blockchain space getting more and more green, probably faster than the electric vehicles will launch at this point in time. Specifically because it turns out there was not a very good reason for it to be that energy intensive.
Mhm.
And secondly, we don't want to live in a world where a piece of software generates that much CO2 for the atmosphere. But I think you also touched on something there about alternative fuel vehicles and expectations around them, as opposed to reality. So, and I'll kind of tie this back to early 1900s again. Nowadays, it's full known that cars pollute the earth and are bad for the planet. But in the early 1900s, when this first started happening, nobody was like, I wonder if this will be a problem, right? So having learning a bit from our mistakes of last time, as we move toward alternative vehicles, you have to think about how can this go wrong? And I think the very simple way it can go wrong is, well, what's going to happen with the batteries in 10 years? Because as we all know, battery manufacturing is not a clean, is very much not a clean business.
Right.
So if we hope to achieve, what we expect out of these alternative fuel methods, we need to take some extra steps to make sure it happens. With a battery vehicle, it really comes down to recycling, for example, right? And reuse. So because an average car has or new electric vehicles, I should say, has 10 essentially 1,000 iPhone batteries or more in it. And if you don't recycle it correctly, it's going to end up in a junk pile. We'll be living in essentially a nuclear disaster of an Earth, but just from car batteries themselves. And the other problem we're seeing with alternative fuels is, sometimes new issues arise, like batteries catch on fire. And based on my experience here in the automotive space over the 10 years, automotive manufacturers don't necessarily actually collect all that data. So as we found out with GM's recalls, GM does not actually know which bolts have a bad battery and which ones do not. And this is, to some extent, not their fault. This is a summary of regulations and how they've done things in the past, where they don't want to collect the data because they don't want to be readily responsible for every problem, right? So then it comes down to, okay, well then who is collecting the battery health and who is going to recycle it? And that's where, coming back to what DIMO is allowing a human to do, is when they buy their car, to collect the data from their vehicle. And as long as they have it, I can guarantee you there will be a battery recycler on the other end who will be more than happy if they know if this is a good battery or a bad battery, right away be able to know, can I put in another car? Can I remanufacture it? And creating that loop early on in this alternative fuel change that we're going through will be the deciding factor between whether we will actually live in a cleaner world or it will kind of turn out like last time.
Yeah, I think there are so many different dimensions that I guess we can probably go on for a long time, but then we do have a limit in terms of how long we can have this episode. So one question that I would like to get your inputs on is particularly with your view of the technology landscape for two segments of people: somebody who's considering a career in this space, or somebody who wants to switch to this space.
Okay.
What would be your advice, starting with whether they should even consider this now, or is it still a little premature, wait for some time? Or is it something that is fit only for people with certain skills or certain aptitudes and so on?
No, I think that anybody can enter this space. And, I've seen this in building DIMO and hiring as well. We've hired people from all backgrounds, all walks of life. Making a switch is really just about executing it. There's certain types of experience that certainly helps, in terms of getting ramped up. But one of the most interesting things is in software, you always find how knowledge of one, let's say, SDK or protocol or ecosystem can readily be applied to another one. So one interesting thing that I've discovered through my time getting more into distributed computing and blockchain spaces is writing good smart contracts or distributed software is in a lot of ways like writing very good embedded software. Because it kind of has the same constraints that it has to run under. It has to be very efficient. It has to be fast, and it has to be very robust. So one example is we had somebody who was actually an assembly line PLC programmer that is now moving into writing smart contracts. And a lot of people don't know these things, but they're actually very similar in terms of how you have to think about them and the engineering practices and not tools, but engineering practices that you have to consider. So those kinds of little, gifts in engineering where you will find that certain things do translate actually quite well, and you can leverage experience from your previous work on your next one. I would say that's on the software side. Now with vehicles and connected vehicle in general, real world, I think that is actually probably the largest switch for most people. A lot of the software that gets written today is either a mobile app with a backend or a web app with a backend. And once you start tying in, the IoT aspect of connectivity and cellular, connectivity loss as the car is driving, you start tying in, the embedded code on the device, and it's the real world aspect of problem solving that makes it far more challenging. And I would say is that if people are willing to take on that challenge, it is extremely rewarding to get into.
On that reassuring note, thank you, Yev, for coming on the show and sharing your experience and perspectives.
Thank you so much for having me. Hope to be back again.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.